Hello and welcome to our Adopt a Friend Getting Started video. We're going to jump right in and launch the Adopt a Friend Service Setup program. This is your first step. You're going to fill in all of your shelter information. Most of this is pretty obvious, straightforward. Then once you get down to, we have three locations. One is where is the logo file going to be, and then we have where all of our pet photos are going to be, the image library. And we also have another logo if you need an animal control logo or a different logo for your animal control. You can also add in a logo down here. Also, generally you're better off working with JPEGs. They're a better quality photo. It's more current. If you have a sales tax rate for any sales tax applicable items, you can put that down here. This will support international zip codes. Also, there's a setting in Adopt a Friend which locks down your zip codes. So if you don't already have a zip code entered, you're going to have to stop and go put the zip code in. We do that to make sure that there's no typos in the city and things like that. You can shut that off here just by turning on international. That'll also accept the international zip codes. We don't recommend that, but in the beginning, where if you're in a large area where you don't have where you do have a number of zip codes, you may want to just shut that off in the beginning until you can get your zip codes set up. There's a couple of other options here. The paper saver, with that on, the adoption receipt will not print the health records. With that off, it will add the health record onto the bottom of the adoption forms. We have some document wording, user-defined fields. You can get into these a little bit later, the different documents that we support. We also have a list of breeds. It's basically the Pet Finder list of breeds and species. If for some reason you can add your own breeds and species in Adopt a Friend, but also if you want to make sure that you're locked into those breeds and species, just don't click this and they will have to choose one of the breeds and species off the drop-down list. There are some restrictions that you could put on here. This will also remove the health record from the adoption form, and also taking off any vaccination records. And there's also an option to add a donation line on a receipt if you would like. There's and this is an option basically at the end of a receipt to thank them for any donation that happened during the initial transaction. That just prints an extra line. If you want to prevent anyone from changing any prices, you can set that down here. And also the health lockdown, that basically means in some states you're not allowed to change a health record after it's entered, and if you click that off, once they save the health record, they can't go back into it. Back up to the logo file. If you're working on a network where more than one computer is going to be using Adopt a Friend, even though this machine might be the server, you're going to basically go out to your network, out to whichever machine is the server. Okay, in this case, this is our Adopt a Friend folder, and we're going to go down into Images, and here's our Adopt a Friend folder, Adopt a Friend logo. And again, the same thing for the image library. I'm actually just going to go ahead and cut and paste this here. You can see the difference between a local directory and one that's on the network. This is what a network folder looks like, and again, this will be pointing towards the Adopt a Friend server. So that's it. Once we've got the installation information done, now we're ready to actually launch the software. By default, the Adopt a Friend password is username and password is admin, and the password is admin. That'll get you into the software for starters, and then later on you're going to actually change that at some point and delete that. And actually, that's the first thing I'm going to show you is setting up the individuals in Adopt a Friend. So task 1, we're going to go into System Administration, into Security. There are two parts of security. First of all, there are the tasks, and then there are the users, which are the people working at the shelter. Let's take a quick look at the tasks. Generally, we have some defaults here, and at some point in time, you may want to come back in and change this once you get more familiar with the software and you know what employees you would like to have access to certain options, and that can be done basically by job functions. So by default, we have a user that we're going to call the staff member, and you can see here they're allowed to first of all get into the people menu, they can get into pets, they can get into all the major options. However, we have any staff member disabled from financial management and system administration, so they cannot get into those options. They will be grayed out on the menu. And then there are some sub-menus below that. So here are some supporting tables. You can see a staff member, we're going to let them into edit mode, and we're going to let them into certain things. Maybe we're going to allow them into the zip code table. So again, we're going to decide what the job function of staff, anyone who's in that job function, is allowed to do. Again, once you get more familiar with the software and what people are allowed into, this will make a little more sense to you. Then we're going to enter our users. Okay, so far I think we have a couple of sample users in here. So here's our first user. Basically, we're going to get a name, a password, their full name as you'd like to see it appear. Actually, let me enter somebody new here. Entering a new record. Along the bottom, you can see these, they're called the record selectors. And you can see there's already 10 people in our database. And I'm just going to go ahead. I clicked the button that says New Records. Some screens you're going to go into will already be in a blank record. So you can just start typing, or in this case, we go to the end by clicking. Let me go back to the beginning here. This is, if you think of these as buttons on your VCR, this is takes you back to the first record. So it's like a rewind to the beginning. And then I can also click through one record at a time, looking at everybody in our database. And then I can also go to the last record with this button down here. And obviously I can go backwards with this button. And again, a new button. If you point to these, there'll be little help tags that'll pop up. And here I'm going to go ahead and start a new record. So the user ID would basically be the ID that the employee is going to enter when they log into Adopt a Friend. So I'm going to enter myself here. Whatever password you want to assign them. Upper and lowercase does not matter in Adopt a Friend. Okay, we're going to do this again just to make sure we got the right password in. Then we're going to put their full name in, as you would like to see it on any reports and forms that this employee is going to process. Now here's where that staff designation comes in. So generally in the beginning, by default, you're probably going to make everyone except a couple of people that you would allow to go in and passwords and financial management. But generally, you can make everybody a staff member except for a couple of people. So I'm going to make them a staff person. Their phone extension, their email, that's all optional. Then we have a profit center. Generally, it's just going to be all. However, if you do have multiple locations, you may want to talk a little bit more about how we're going to break them up from an accounting standpoint and where each employee works, things like that. But we do have the ability to break out different locations that an employee might make. So if this is something that you think you need to do, it might be time just to ask us a quick question. It's better than trying to explain it on video, and we'll talk to you a little bit about how you can set up your organization by the different areas of profit centers. Then some specifics on this employee. Do we want them to be able to see adoptions? Any employee can accept, donations. Any employee can accept donations. However, you may want to limit who can rummage through the donations and see who donated and when they donated. So that's up to you and, again, how your organization is set up. So we're going to let this person view adoptions. Also, if you wanted to prevent this person from deleting pets and people and also health records, you can click that. This is whether they're allowed to accept an animal in for as an intake. And also, we do have a blacklist. It's basically flagging someone that's trying to do a transaction that we may want to take a second look at. And then somebody would need to override that if possible. So generally it's administrative, but you can allow somebody to override the blacklist. Also, the ability to look back at a person's transactions, see everything that they've done with us, that's also can be shut off. Whether they're a point-of-sale manager, this allows them to look back at old point-of-sale transactions, and also we can again lock down whether or not we want to force them to say yes or no on a health record, and also lock them down from doing anything in a health record once it's been filled out. If you remember, we had that setting as a global setting for the organization, but you can also put that on a person-by-person lockdown as well. And that's how we enter an individual. So that's kind of step one. Back to the main menu, there's going to be a bunch of basically supporting tables that need to be filled out before you can really get rolling. So I'm going to start up in the system administration. That's what we got down here. So you can see we have our supporting table section. We have categories and services. This is probably one of the hardest concepts in Adopt-A-Friend. It's really an accounting issue. At the end of the day now, or the end of the week, you're probably sending a report to your accounting, which is basically, the sum of your adoptions, the sum of any microchips or any other items that you sell. So these are really a total, a department, and you can see here we have one for adoptions. And this is probably the easiest way to explain it. This is going to give us a total for all adoptions. Underneath that, most shelters have a number of adoption fees, and that's going to be below this. You can think of this as either departments or categories. There are also general ledger accounts. So they're going to be, let's say at the simplest case, we have a fee for dog adoptions and a fee for cat adoptions. So we'll still be able to look at those once we have those set up. And then we're also going to be able to get a total of all the adoptions. Same thing with, let's see what other items we have in here. We have boardings. Most shelters don't do boardings. I'm going to skip over that. Clothing, that might be from a thrift shop. Donations. Donations is a special category. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Euthanasias, licenses, medical things, reclaims, spay and neuters, spay vouchers. We support vouchers if you're giving out a voucher to a new adopter who's then going to take it to their veterinarian. So these are all just samples, and you can leave the ones that apply to you. So generally they're areas that we make money in. Even if we don't make money, if it's a service that's passing through, you're going to want to have that set up. Another good example is vaccinations. Underneath that, we could have our Bordetella, our rabies, but we want to have at least one category to put all those services under. Again, the same thing works. Just clicking through here. Here's starting a new record. We'll talk about searching through the database in a little bit, but basically this is kind of, if you imagine a filing cabinet, we're kind of flipping through the filing cabinet looking at the contents. Okay, once we have our service categories in, below that we have our services. Okay, I've already got a couple in here, some of the obvious ones. We have, we set up a code for it. This is rabies 3. This is for a rabies 3-year vaccination. And here's that category that we just entered above. Here's again all those categories on a drop-down menu. Wherever you see drop-down menus, almost all of them, there's a place where you can go into a supporting table and set up what's in that drop-down. It's all customizable. Then another concept that's a little more difficult until you see it in action, we have something called the automation. These services that have automation will trigger a certain procedure during the transaction. For example, an adoption would trigger an adoption procedure, which would bring up the pet, automatically change the information on the pet, take a snapshot of the original person who brought the pet in, and update it and show that it's been adopted, and also bring up all the contracts. So generally there's a one-to-one here, and you can see all the different things that we have automated in Adopt-A-Friend. For example, we have microchips, so if you are using one of our 2 microchip providers, there's an automatic procedure to basically make sure that those chips get automatically registered. Then we also have a UPC code. We do support barcode scanning. We're also going to be adding shortly a full inventory control module that'll work with services. So right now we just have a UPC code, and we have a price, and we have an item cost, which is really just informational. Once we put our inventory control system in, you'll see a whole lot more items, the different vendors. If this is a vaccine, we may have multiple vendors, different costs. We may want to do purchase orders and receiving and see basically what's coming in and what's going out, and basically how each item is selling. So basically we're going to, if you're using a barcode scanner, you can put the UPC code in. Might not apply to a rabies vaccine. We have our price. If for some reason you decide to stop using a service, you can just make it inactive. That way all the historic reports will still contain this item, but the people won't be able to use it moving forward. If it's taxable, you can click that off, and it's going to tax it at that rate that we entered when we first did the setup screen. Flag for animal control. It just started out as a way of basically catching people whose animal has been at large more than once. When they come into the shelter for the second time and they check in to pick up their dog, there would be a little pop-up that says they've already done this service, and it's a way for some of those shelters that charge a graduated fee for the multiple times that an animal's at large. It also could be used for good things, maybe that they have donated in the past, whatever reason that you would like the operator to know about that person when they're checking them in for some sort of a transaction at the shelter. We also support prescriptions. If you have a veterinarian and you're actually doing prescriptions, this would be the directions. Default health notes. This could be, for example, for a standard health check. Down here, you could actually have the different items of the health check, and they will appear on the health record. Here's the health coupon. So if you don't actually give rabies shots and the new adopters take the animal to the vet for a rabies shot, you can actually print out a certificate or a coupon, a voucher, whatever you want to call it, and it would basically, whatever text you want to have there, but it would say something like, take this to your veterinarian. We have some shelters where the veterinarian then submits that for payment. There's a number of ways you can deal with that to your advantage. And then if it is a vaccination, we can either have the months or days until recall. And then as lots of the vaccine comes in, we can check in a lot, who's the manufacturer, the serial number, whether the way it's administered, and also whether it's live or killed. And that's basically how we would enter all of our services. We also, if you do support barcoding, you could actually print out a barcode label and add that on. A lot of our shelters are starting to sell some retail products. Some of them even have full retail stores connected back to the shelter, so we're going to be getting in a little more of that. We also have a retail product system, so we're going to be adding some of the features from that to Adopt a Friend over the next couple of months. So just flipping through here. This is a good time for me to show you. If you come up to the top of the screen here, this little button here is called Data Sheet View. So once we click this, we're kind of getting an overview, like an Excel spreadsheet. And this is a good time to show you all the neat things you can do. For example, you can sort alphabetically, A to Z, Z through A. You can also do what's called a filter. Let's say we just wanted to see our spay and neuter services. We can go ahead and come up here and click this button that says filter by selection. And you can see we just narrowed that down to just those services. We can also release the filter. That's real useful if you're looking in the pet database for, that brown dog that came in on a certain date. Once you get familiar with some of the filters and some of the built-in queries, it's really easy to find something very specific. So again, here's a little overview of all the different services we have in our fictional shelter. We have some t-shirts, a whole lot of things. And that's going to be pretty much your first job, is coordinate with whoever your bookkeeper is, so we make sure we can get them a nice clean report either daily or however often they're used to seeing that. Next, we have a list of veterinarians. This can either be veterinarians in the shelter or veterinarians in the area. These can all be filled out with some little notes. Our zip codes, as I mentioned before, I think the demo comes with a bunch of zip codes built in, and you can either override the ability to lock down the zip codes, or you can just go ahead and preset all the zip codes. If that's something that you can do, that's a good idea. Just get them into the system. Document wording. We've got tons of different documents. Some of the older ones that we've had for a while is obviously the adoption contract. What I would suggest from these is go into, it's only a little bit of slot we give you to work here with. If you already have them in a Microsoft Word document, great. You can cut and paste them into each section. Obviously, take a look at everything that's here so you can see which documents we do for you. Some of the newer ones, which we did over here, you're going to start to see these, and we're going to double back into some of the older documents where you're going to have the ability to change the font and do a few more things. Different fonts, different sizes, different colors. So on the newer agreements, you're going to be able to do that. And in the course of the year, we're going to kind of back into these and give you a little more ability to change the fonts and things along those lines. Next on our list, I'm going to go back to the main menu. And then we start to get into specific areas. For example, in the people, we have what's called sponsor types. Okay, and you can see one example here. Volunteers. These are generally non-monetary things that we would like to know about a person. The donations are obviously tracked, so we can tell you anytime anyone's a donor. But here's an example of some of the items we have here. We have foster care providers. You can even, this one is specified as a foster care provider for a cat and foster care for a dog. They're a board member. So basically anything that you want to track, corporate sponsors, anything that you want to track generally that's non-monetary, you're going to put it in here first. As long as I'm in the master list, I'm going to show you how that comes into play. I'm going to go into our master list. This is our list of everybody that we deal with, people-wise, good and bad. And you can see where those drop-downs come into play. Here's those drop-downs. This is the primary thing we'd like to know about that person. Again, that was that list that we just filled in. And over here, that list continues. So we could see someone's a volunteer. They're also on the board. And this list will keep growing. They will also foster a dog. They will also foster a cat. And I think that's pretty much all of our volunteer statuses. And that has a couple of functions. It, first of all, identifies that person. When we get in, we can see that they're a foster provider or a volunteer or a board member. It also puts them onto a mailing list. We have a number of built-in mailing lists. The one that's person-based is up here. Here's the sponsor type. So let's say we wanted to do a mailing to board members and volunteers. So we're basically creating over here who's going to hear from us today. And then we can also enter new people in. So there's a date field when somebody's first entered into the computer. So if the first, let's say for example, every month you want to send out a welcome letter to people who have come into the shelter for the first time. We can also include adopters between a certain date. Each one of these can be run by itself, so we can do a mailing just to adopters. We can do a new mailing, a mailing just to new people in the system. Sometimes you may be doing a mailing to specifics and then also want to attach adopters on. They might be interested in some of the programs you have going on. And then when you finally decide who's going to basically get this mailing, you have a couple of options. We're going to, first of all, we can print a standard Avery 5160 label. Okay, that would be if you're printing your own labels out. Another option would be to export it to a standard Windows file that could be imported to any other software. You could also consider doing a mail merge with that if you wanted to, let's say, do an envelope rather than just a label. That can be imported. Another reason would be some of the larger shelters that their volume is too large to do their own mailing. They'll send this list out to a mailing company that'll handle all the mailing for them. So we'll get back to the customer file a little bit more in another training session. I just wanted to show you how these tied back into the person's lesson. So that's basically all we have on the sponsor types. Let me get into the pets. And under the pets section, supporting tables, we have a number of things. We have our species table. Again, this comes preloaded with the Pet Finder breed and species list. You should look familiar if you've worked with that at all. You can add animals on here. You can see we've had a dinosaur here. However, if you do want them to appear on Pet Finder, you do have to map them to some other item that's in the Pet Finder list. So let's go ahead and we'll just put something in here. Wherever we have the drop-down lists, if it's a particularly big one, you can just start typing the letters in and it'll take you to that spot in the list. And that's how you enter any new species that you'd like. Animal origins. This is fairly important. There's a report of your intakes and dispositions by their origins. And you can see in most cases, again, I'm going to go over the data sheet view so we can see what we have here. In most cases, it's going to be animal control or family intakes, but there's a whole bunch of other breakdowns if you wanted to. Generally, again, it's going to be family and strays, maybe animal control, which is a subset of strays. Again, you're going to set all these up. And then we have some reports, whether you want to exclude this. For example, if you have a shot clinic, you may not want to include them in your statistics for the month, so you could exclude them. And also, if you stopped using any particular origin, you could just click this. It won't disappear from your old reports, but no one can use that moving forward. Next, we have our status types. These are generally their final dispositions. You can see, again, some of the samples. Okay, and there's a little more information on this report. You have the option of saying that they're in the facility and whether or not you want to allow an adoption. So this is generally an animal that just came in. The terminology we generally use is they're surrendered if they came in from a family. They come in as stray if they were brought in as a stray or from animal control. And it's up to you whether you want to put this allow adoption. First of all, allows you to run them through the adoption process and adopt a friend, but it also decides which animals are going to go up to the 17 different websites that we upload to. So some shelters say, okay, this animal just came in, but I'm going to get him up on the website immediately, so you would allow an adoption. Again, we have some other options here, whether to exclude them from certain reports and if you want to stop using that status. So again, flipping through this, a stray, yes, it's definitely in-house. We may not want to allow adoption yet because they're usually on some sort of a hold. Reclaim, they're definitely on in-house. Lost. If the hospital's in-house, you may want to include that. So again, go ahead and just put in anything that applies to where you are. Then we have our surrender reasons. This is kind of a subset of their origins. Why were they surrendered? Sometimes it's redundant. A stray was surrendered because it was a stray. Color. We have a full 172 color combinations. Again, this is a Pet Finder list, and you can add to this, but I think you'll find just about any combination that you need. Kennel maintenance. We already have a video on setting up your kennels that's available on YouTube, so take a peek at that. If you have, actually it's very useful even if you have a small shelter. It's particularly useful if you have a large shelter with cages, kennels, runs, all kinds of things all over, just basically managing who's in them and a new animal where they're going to go. We have so many supporting tables. We have a second supporting table menu, and this is generally what I mentioned before, setting up your kennels. We also have adoption locations. If you're part of Hill's Science Diet program, and if you're not, I would highly suggest taking a look at that. A lot of our shelters use that, and Adopt a Friend supports the automatic uploading to Hills Science Diet. If you send them a list of your adopters, they give you, it's either dog food or dog food credits. And they recently just added, okay, where did this adoption, so many shelters doing outreach adoption programs, you know, it might have been at PetSmart or other locations. So where did the adoption happen, if not at the shelter? Back to our previous menu. So we pretty much got everything on the pet side. Animal control, we have some supporting menus down here. Even if you don't do animal control, you're probably going to want to at least set up your municipalities. Okay, this is where the animals come in from. So in addition to saying, okay, it's a stray, you can say, okay, it's a stray from a particular town. And that's real important, particularly in shelters that have contracts with municipalities around them, to be able to break out the animals by where they came in from. We also track where they go out to, but most of the shelters seem to be more interested in, you know, where they came from. We also have the other different, if you are doing animal controls, this is locations where they might be held, not necessarily in the kennel, but just certain places where an animal may be held. Different complaint types. Again, most of the default, the ones that are already Adopt a Friend, will probably be fine. You can add to that. Complaint resolutions. Example of the resolutions. When we get to the complaint and investigation section, basically just putting any sort of a resolution into the investigation, it's considered a closed investigation. Methods of capture. And we have a few more down here. This is licensing setup. We have the ability on the license form to add items to it and just kind of make it look a little different. And then the contact methods, the different ways that you can set up contacts when someone calls in. Financial management, this is generally the last section that's going to have supporting tables underneath it, financial supporting tables. Appeal types. Again, some examples. This is basically when a donation comes in. What was the reason for that donation? So at a minimum, you can have a general fund. Somebody comes in and gives you some money for no particular reason. However, you might have different appeal types. You might have events. Let's say our holiday gala. And also, let's say there's a general price for the tickets for the holiday gala. We'll make them $25. And now that'll get treated special when that item is keyed into the point of sale. So when you're selling a ticket or taking an adoption, a donation, that money is going to be designated to one of these appeal types. Fund codes. Most shelters don't use this, but it is, some of the largest shelters use this. Money came in. What bank did it go into? Memorials and honors. Another section of a donation is the ability to have a memorial or an honor fund. So once you've set that up, you can fill in the family information. So when a donation comes in, it'll be applied to this memorial fund. And we also know who the family is that's being memorialized or honored. And that way, when you do your thank you letters, you can also make sure that the family gets a copy of either a report or of the thank yous with everyone who donated to that fund. Reason codes. Some of this is redundant. You know, we already know that somebody gave us money for the holiday gala, but you may want to track it in another way also. So this is basically another breakdown as to why they may have made that donation. The next section, we have our source codes. These are generally another way of determining where these donations came from. And you can see the example here that it came from a mailing. So you might have, a holiday campaign and different ways for that money to come in. And that's basically where you do it here. It might have been from mailings. This will also help you track the performance of any direct mail or any events that you have. Last but not least, we have our payment types. These are all the different payments that we accept. You have the option of clicking whether it's a credit card and needs this additional information. This is only if you are using our credit card processing. At the moment, we have just our one credit card partner, which is OpenEdge. They actually have great rates. If you haven't looked into it yet, just give us a buzz or drop us a line. We'll point you in the right direction. We hope we'll be adding some other options for you, but most of the shelters that I've looked into credit card processing have been real happy with the rates they've gotten from OpenEdge. So just go ahead and fill in your different payment types here. Pretty self-explanatory. And the last section is the profit centers. As we mentioned in the beginning, we might have transactions. Let's say you want to break out differently from a clinic and then the shelter and the thrift shop. Again, you may want to talk to us before you do this. You may not have to break them out separately because there are a number of reports that'll do that for you. So that's probably worth a conversation. And that's basically it. Your next step would be to go ahead and start entering any of your current inventory. And that can be done simultaneously as long as you have your reasons and all of your pet supporting tables filled in. Then you can go and start entering your inventory. And we're going to break that out into another video for you. Thanks for listening.